What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome back to my channel. All right, busy week one is in the books for the college football world. Today, I'm giving you my updated week two top 25. So I didn't upload the top 25 poll last week because, well, from my preseason poll, nothing changed. So it would have been just me looking at the camera and said, here's my top 25 poll. Nothing's changed. And that's going to do it. No, so I didn't upload one last week because, again, with week zero, nothing really changed. No ranked teams of mine were playing. There's a lot of shuffling around in this one. The AP poll, the coaches poll are already out. Again, I wait for those to come out so I can compare them to mine. It's not anything I base off of, although you'll see some similarities in there with that. But hey, thank you guys for clicking on the video. First of all, before we get into it, if you would like to support the channel, you want to see more of me during the season, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, like, share. Also, leave some comments down below. I do read the ones that come through, and I sometimes get a kick out of them. I enjoy looking at them. It means a lot to have you guys comment on my content. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get in here now to my top 25, and we're going to start over on the right-hand side of your screen here. So, dropped out of my rankings. There are 4 teams that dropped out of my rankings. Indiana at number 14 dropped out. LSU at 18 dropped. Louisiana at 19. And Washington at 21. Of course, all 4 of those teams lost this past weekend, hence why they dropped out of my poll. But for all 4 of those teams, I could honestly see them getting back into this poll. I don't think it's too far-fetched that we're going to see either of these 4 teams back in even the AP or the coaches poll sometime later down the line. However, for right now, just because of the way they lost, who they lost to, things like that. Other teams just moved ahead of them, so those 4 teams dropped out. You'll notice I have 3 of them, though, on my first 5 out. That's LSU, Louisiana, and Indiana. Washington's not on there because Washington's got a lot more to work out, but I still believe LSU's a solid team, still really like Louisiana, and still really like Indiana. So those teams could make their way in there. But then the other 2 on my first 5 out are newcomers onto this list. That's Auburn and Maryland. So Auburn looked really dominant in that win over Akron, and Maryland had a really good win over what I think is a pretty solid West Virginia team. You could maybe throw others like Nevada, Liberty, TCU, NC State. Those are teams I could also see making this poll. Again, there were just guys or other teams that beat them out. So again, this is not a prediction or anything. As you can see, the AP poll, USA Today polls are already out. And I'm not going to be going into like a deep dive on how these teams did this past week. If you want that, go check the video I uploaded yesterday. I know it's long, but if you can watch all of it, more power to you. But I completely understand. It's like 40 minutes. I get it. I promise the reviews will not be that long in the future. But let's go ahead and get into my top 25 poll here. 25, I have UCF. So the Knights were down to Boise State for a lot of that game and were able to come back and win. And hey, their defense even stepped up and made some plays, which usually UCF's defense, statistically one of the worst in the nation in terms of yardage allowed and things like that. But the defense for UCF really did step up in the second half. I was impressed with this team. They were on the cusp last week, I believe. They were probably part of my first 5 out, and if they were not, I definitely mentioned them. I think UCF deserves a spot in my top 25 poll. I really do like this team. I think this team not necessarily is back to the way they were playing a couple years ago, but still a solid team overall. As you can see, not rated in any of the other polls. So maybe I'm overrating UCF up to this point, but I don't think so. Number 25, 24, and 23 are 2 Pac-12 teams. Utah, who is new to the rankings this week, and Arizona State, who has moved up 2 spots. So both these teams played FCS schools, and Utah struggled a little bit, which is why I don't have Utah as high as the AP voters and the USA Today coaches do, which because Utah struggled against Weber State a little bit. I still think there are some things that Utah's got to work out, but overall, definitely deserve to be a top 25 team. And Arizona State, a team that I did have ranked last week. Of course, they won their game pretty easily. Nothing to do but to move them up. 22 is Ole Miss. What impressed me with Ole Miss in that win over Louisville was not their offense. We know this offense is going to be dynamic, but that defense was really good. Held them to 0 points in the first half. I believe just around 100 to 150 yards, somewhere in there. I can't remember the exact number, but it was good, and it was one of their lowest numbers in a long time. Of course, Louisville came back to score points in that game, but overall, a lot of good signs from Ole Miss in that one. If that defense can continue to play like that against higher levels of competition, you're going to see Ole Miss rise in the poll. You could also see Virginia Tech rise in the poll. The only questions I do have about Virginia Tech are, can they do what they did against North Carolina for the rest of the year? Now, the defense looked good in that win against North Carolina, but the offense, definitely some things to work on there. I think the Hokies can get more consistent. It's just a question of, well, do they, right? So Virginia Tech's at 21. You got to put them on here because of that win against North Carolina, who, as you've noticed, we haven't seen yet, but they did not drop out. That is because we see North Carolina when we move into the top 20. So again, that's 25 through 21. Now moving into the top 20, number 20 is Miami. And people have I've watched videos and things too to see other people's opinions because they're earlier on this than I am. Sorry, I was recording the review yesterday. But with Miami, it's a lot of people are going to talk about Miami like Miami's a joke. Miami, what was Miami doing in the top 15? Really, you get blown out by 31 points? Look, I think Miami later down the road, and again, how I base off my polls is I base off how the team has looked up to that point and just what I know the team is capable of. Miami, albeit, did not look good in that loss against Miami. They got blown out by 31 points. But I also think that is a huge credit to Alabama for being able to do that to such a talented team like Miami. Yes, there are things Miami needs to work on, but I think for people to say Miami's a joke, Miami doesn't deserve this and that, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit. I still have faith in this Miami team. I think they can still be really solid this year. They just ran into a really good Alabama team that looked the most dominant out of anyone in week 1. Spoiler alert. So Miami for me is at number 20. They dropped 7 spots. Moving up 3 spots is Coastal Carolina. They move up simply because other people ahead of them move down. So Coastal Carolina here at number 19. Hey, got a good win against the Citadel. They look good. Next game against Kansas. Wouldn't be surprised if they blow Kansas out either. Again, this Coastal Carolina team has a really easy schedule. So we'll see what happens with this team. Don't expect this team to move a lot more unless, again, of course, teams ahead of them lose like what happened this week. UCLA moving in. They are the highest ranked team that wasn't ranked last week. That was confusing. But you guys know what I'm getting at. So UCLA not ranked in my poll last week. They have to be. They have to be this week after you manhandle Hawaii, who I think is a pretty solid team, and then you go out and you beat what everyone thought, not me. I had some less faith in LSU than other people. I hate using that terminology, but hey, it's how I get my point across. I was a person who didn't like LSU as much as other people. And when UCLA beat them, I'm like, seems about right. I was not surprised that UCLA beat LSU. It's just the way that they did it. They relied on a lot of big plays. LSU's defensive struggles continued. The only thing I want to see more of from UCLA is I want to see DTR get better. I want to see Dorian Thompson-Robinson be able to throw the football more because he's got good weapons at the wide receiver position, especially at the tight end position with Greg Dulcich. So I want to see DTR throw the ball more. Once I see that, I'll start putting UCLA higher, like you've seen other people do. Both the polls have them at 16. I've seen UCLA as high as 10th. So for them to get up to that point, DTR, throw the football. North Carolina, Wisconsin each drop. North Carolina, of course, more than Wisconsin, dropping 9 spots. Hey, it was their defense that kept them in that game. And albeit a loss is a loss, you drop 9 spots. But if I'm a North Carolina fan, I don't think I'm feeling too bad about this loss. And I know that to North Carolina fans, that might seem outrageous. But if I were a North Carolina fan, I would take it. See, I'm also a glass half full kind of guy. You know, saying glass half full, glass half empty, which do you see? I'm a glass half full kind of guy. And I see North Carolina as, okay, that defense played, at least in my opinion, a lot better than what I was expecting. Now, the offense looked flat, yes, and that offense has to get going. But for North Carolina as a whole, not a horrible performance. Again, the offense has a lot of things to work on, particularly getting Sam Howell the weapons that he needs. So, of course, you drop 9 spots, but I don't think they should be out of the top 20 like you see both the polls doing. Wisconsin has a similar argument, although not really quite as big of an extent. Excuse my stuttering. Down 4 spots from last week in my poll. They're at 16th now. I still feel like this Wisconsin team is going to be really good in the Big Ten this year. It's just that, well, their offense had some stupid turnovers in the red zone. And again, if they don't turn the ball over, Wisconsin wins that game. So for the Badgers, got some work to do, but you found your running back. Graham Mertz looked a little bit better than a lot of the times last year, and your defense still looked excellent. I don't think there's too much to worry about in the long term for Wisconsin. And now the top 15. Texas is back. Give me a couple more weeks. 15th is what I have them right now, up 8 spots from 2 weeks ago. Last week, 2 weeks ago. Same poll. It was the same poll. But they went up 8 spots after a pretty convincing win against Louisiana, in which their defense played a lot better than I was expecting. But that Steve Sarkisian offense was working in the Texas program. So Texas, a team that might emerge. I know some people are talking Texas is the Big 12's best team. Let's not get ahead of ourselves yet. Texas has got an interesting game with Arkansas coming up. We'll see how that one goes. Florida, they did drop a spot because, or from last week at least, they did drop a spot because I'm not quite sure about Emory Jones yet. Emory Jones, I thought, was going to be a solid option at quarterback. Turns out, only threw for, 113 yards. Correct me if I'm wrong, Florida fans, last week. So, in my opinion, not the way you wanted to win the game, but you won the game. You're going to hear me say that a couple more times throughout this video, especially once we get higher and higher in the ranking. So, again, maybe not how you wanted your quarterback to play, but a win is a win, regardless, though they do drop a spot because other teams passed them. One of those teams being USC, who jumped up 3 spots. And again, not the way you wanted to beat San Jose State, but you held a pretty dynamic offense to only 7 points. And Nick Starkel didn't even throw a touchdown. So I think that's good on USC's defense, which was a point of concern for me come the beginning of the season. USC's got some tougher tests down the road. We'll see how they fare. Penn State jumps up 8 spots from number 20 all the way up to number 12 after a really good road win against Wisconsin. Just talked about Wisconsin, talk about Penn State. They didn't turn the ball over in that game, and Penn State looked good in all facets. Their defense looked good. They forced turnovers in the red zone, albeit some of them were pretty stupid mistakes that probably shouldn't have happened, but albeit a win is a win for Penn State. I think this Penn State team is now is the second best team in the Big Ten. Maybe besides one other team. Of course, Ohio State's going to be that best team, but Penn State, I think, is in that fight right now for the second best team in the Big Ten. You'll see someone else who's in that fight as well. But Oregon drops 1 spot from number 11, just shy of the top 10 because, well, they struggled with Fresno State, right? This is a team that, again, a win is a win, not how you wanted to win the game. I know I sound like a broken record, but it's true for a lot of the teams that are on my screen right now. For Oregon, you just got to play better. And I don't know how far this team can get with Anthony Brown at quarterback, and the offense just didn't play what I thought the offense could play like. Now, this week, they get a really good test against a really good Ohio State team. So we'll see what happens with that one there. I definitely will be previewing that one on Friday. My preview video is going to come out on Friday, not Thursday, because there are no games Thursday. There are games Friday, but none of them are super interesting. So Oregon down 1 spot. Again, just missing the top 10. Speaking of the top 10, let's get into it. How about the Iowa Hawkeyes? Now, I asked you guys to answer a question for me, and, well, I didn't get a response, so I'll ask it again. Good Iowa defense or flat Indiana offense? And I think it was a combination of both. That Iowa defense, Riley Moss, 2 pick sixes. That's why I said 6. 2 pick sixes for Riley Moss. Absolutely incredible defensive performance from Iowa. Only held Indiana to 233 yards in that game. That was an excellent performance by Iowa, and they're going to get a really good test coming up this week with another team that you also see on my screen. The AP poll also ranks them as such. So when I make the poll before the AP poll comes out. I will say that. Usually I make them on Sundays, but again, because this was a weird week, I made it like literally just before the AP poll released. And when I saw they had it 10th, I'm like, yep, good job, AP poll. You got that one right. So they jump up 7 spots. We're going to learn a lot about Iowa and another team you see on the screen here, but we'll get to them in a little bit. Talking about Notre Dame now, they do jump up 2 spots after a pretty shaky win by Florida State. I feel like they could have won that game by more points. Again, it was just teams ahead of them dropped and fell. So Notre Dame up here at number 9. I definitely feel like they're a top 10 team, although I don't know how much that's going to get proven down the road because I'll say this. Jack Cohn was great in that game for Notre Dame. I thought the offense played solid. If the defense doesn't get more consistent, doesn't play consistently well, I know they forced 3 interceptions on Jordan Travis, but they let Florida State back into the game. So defense and offense both have some things to work on, but Notre Dame, in my opinion, still a top 10 team. Texas A&M's here at number 8. And here's where I might upset some people. So Texas A&M, number 5 in both of the polls. Again, the AP and USA Today coaches poll. But for Texas A&M, Haynes King threw 3 picks. And I've never really been a huge supporter of the idea that Texas A&M is going to be a playoff team this year, because a lot of people have said Texas A&M is going to be right back to where they were last year. Texas A&M is a team that can go out and win the SEC. Well, I think that part is true. This team definitely was not going to be where it was last year, and they struggled in the early going with Kent State. They get an interesting test this week against Colorado, so again, we'll see what happens there, but A&M at number 8. Iowa State, that's the team that's playing Iowa. The Cy-Hawk Trophy battle is going to be as big as it's ever been. Iowa State struggled with Northern Iowa, but I had to keep them at least in the top 8 because I know what this team is capable of. And I think we're going to learn a lot about what this team is capable of come this game against Iowa, against a pretty good defense. That's going to be an interesting game to watch. Cincinnati is up to number 6. If you're not starting to believe in Cincinnati, start believing, because Cincinnati is a team that can make a run. And especially with Clemson, Miami, and North Carolina all losing, we'll get to Clemson here in a little bit, especially with those 3 teams all losing, that makes the playoff conversation a lot more interesting. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So for Cincinnati, start to believe, because this team can get into the playoff. It can happen. I'm sure of it. So let's go ahead into the top 5. The teams are unchanged, although the order has shifted. So Alabama is at number 1. Of course, no argument there. They looked really dominant in that win over Miami. Georgia at number 2. I don't think people are going to argue with me there. Ohio State at 3. Oklahoma at 4. You can switch those teams around if you'd like. And then Clemson at 5. So let's talk a little bit about the teams on the screen here. So for Georgia, here, we'll lump this together. For Georgia and Clemson, both the teams can play better offensively, but both of those defenses were outstanding in that game in which they played each other. Georgia erased the narrative that they can't win the big games. They showed that they can. And Clemson, well, they look like a young team with this young offensive line and this young offense and all this young talent on the offensive side. Their experience on defense showed, but the young talent on the offensive side was what ultimately led to the downfall in that game. And again, like I just mentioned when I talked about Cincinnati, Cincinnati can get into the playoff because Clemson can no longer face an undefeated team in the ACC championship game. Unless, of course, it's going to be like they can't face an undefeated North Carolina or Miami. I'll say that. Playoff conversation, it's interesting. For Ohio State and Oklahoma, again, I think you can switch the teams, but I do feel like Ohio State won against the better, or they beat the better team last week, if that makes sense. So Ohio State beat what my opinion is an underrated Minnesota team. Even with Mo Ibrahim going down, I still feel like they're underrated and overlooked. And I still feel like they're going to be a really good team, even without Mo Ibrahim there. And Ohio State had to do that on the road. While Oklahoma, they were supposed to play Tulane on the road, but again, because of the hurricane, they said, hey, come play our house, and they still almost lost that game. And the defense that we were hearing about all offseason just wasn't there. So for me, the top 5 teams do stay the same. The order changes a little bit. It's a little bit of a slower week too, but we're going to learn a lot about a lot of these teams in the top 25 and who really belongs in my poll. So that's going to do it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll leave the top 5 up on the screen here while I sign off. If you enjoyed, hey, subscribe, ring the bell, like, share. If you want to see more of me, please do all of those things because it really helps me out, helps you guys out because you're the one who wants to see me. So showing support for the channel does mean a ton to me. We're really close to 400 subscribers, so let's get there. I really want to get to like 425 by the end of the season. If we could do that, that would be awesome. So I'm signing off here. Next video I will upload will be my preview of my top 10 most exciting, biggest games of week 2. Goodbye.